My name is Sarah Whitmore. I'm 28 years old, and 45 minutes into my own wedding reception, my older sister stood up at the head table in front of 150 guests from both families and played a recording of a private phone call between me and my now husband, a call she had no legal right to record and had been secretly capturing for 9 months. She wanted to expose me as a gold digger, destroy my new marriage before it even began, and humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. What she didn't know is that I'd found out about the recordings 6 weeks earlier, and I'd spent those 6 weeks building something of my own. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to take you back to the very beginning, all the way back to when I was a little girl, because the 9 months of secret recordings only make sense once you understand exactly who my sister Eleanor is, and exactly how long she'd been waiting for a moment like this. If you're the kind of person who needs to know how this ends before you can breathe normally again, subscribe now, because I post stories like this twice a day, and the comment section on the last one was honestly better than the story itself. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. The Whitmore family. I was born into a family that had money, old money, the kind that comes with a certain set of expectations, a certain way of moving through the world, a certain unspoken understanding that you never talk about the money directly, but you also never forget it's there. My father, Richard Whitmore, inherited a commercial real estate empire from his father, who inherited it from his father before him. By the time I came along, the Whitmore name was synonymous with a particular kind of quiet, understated wealth, the kind that doesn't announce itself, but also never lets you forget who you're dealing with. My mother, Catherine, came from money too, old Boston money, the kind that traces back to shipping magnates and has its own wing in a museum somewhere. She met my father at a charity gala in New York, and their marriage was the kind of elegant, carefully managed partnership that people in their circles admired. They had 2 daughters, Eleanor, born first, and then me, 3 years later. I want to tell you about Eleanor before I tell you anything else, because she is the entire reason this story exists, and I don't think you can understand what she eventually did without understanding who she'd always been. Eleanor is 31 now, 3 years older than me, and she has spent her entire life being the person everyone expected her to be. She was the golden child. She got the grades, the accolades, the perfect internships, the prestigious job at a top-tier management consulting firm. She was beautiful in the way that made people stop and stare, tall, blonde, poised, the kind of woman who walked into a room and commanded it without saying a single word. Our parents were endlessly proud of her. Our extended family talked about her with a kind of hushed reverence. She was the one who was going to carry the Whitmore legacy forward. And me? I was the other one. The younger, quieter, less impressive one. I didn't have Eleanor's drive, her ambition, her laser-focused determination to succeed at everything she touched. I was creative, artistic, more interested in books and painting and the kind of quiet, unassuming life that didn't require a corner office and a 6-figure salary. I worked as a curator at a small contemporary art gallery in the city, a job I loved but that my family viewed as a hobby rather than a real career. I think for a long time, Eleanor genuinely loved me. We were sisters, after all. We'd shared a bedroom growing up, whispered secrets to each other in the dark, protected each other from our parents' exacting expectations. She was the one who taught me how to do my makeup for my first school dance. She was the one who held my hand when I got my first terrible heartbreak. She was the one who drove me to the hospital when I broke my ankle in college and our parents were out of the country. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. I think it started when I got engaged. No, I think it started before that, when I met James. When I met the man who was going to change everything. How I met James. I met James Chin 4 years ago at a gallery opening for a young artist I'd been working with for months. James was there with a mutual friend, standing in front of a painting I'd curated, his head tilted in the particular way that people do when they're actually looking at something, not just pretending to look. He was tall, warm-eyed, with a kind of easy, genuine smile that made you feel like you'd known him your whole life. We started talking about the painting, a large, abstract piece that most people either loved or hated with no middle ground, and he surprised me by actually understanding it, actually seeing what the artist was trying to do. Most people at those openings just wander through, drinking free wine and pretending to be cultured. James was different. He was a high school art teacher in a Title I school across town, and he brought a group of his students to the opening because he wanted them to see that art could be for them too. I fell in love with him that night, I think. Not in the dramatic, lightning strike way that movies describe, but in the slow, steady way that real love actually happens. Through conversation, through discovery, through the accumulating recognition that you've found someone who sees the world the same way you do. We talked for hours that night, long after the gallery had closed and the staff had started sweeping up around us, and when I finally went home, I knew something had shifted. Our relationship grew slowly, but steadily over the next year. James was patient with my family, even when they weren't patient with him. He came from a working-class background. His parents immigrated from Taiwan before he was born, and his father had worked as a line cook for 30 years while his mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. He'd been the first person in his family to go to college, and he'd become a teacher because he genuinely believed education could change lives. He was the kind of person who gave everything he had to his students, who stayed late to tutor kids who were struggling, who spent his own money on supplies for his classroom because the school budget didn't cover it. My family didn't know what to make of him. My father, I think, was quietly disappointed that I'd chosen someone who wasn't in the same world as us. My mother was gracious but distant, never quite sure what to say to someone whose childhood had been so different from hers. And Eleanor? Eleanor was something else entirely. Eleanor's treatment of James. From the very beginning, Eleanor treated James with a kind of condescension that she seemed to believe was invisible. She'd make comments about his job. How do you manage honestly with that many students? I could never do that for that kind of money. That sounded like sympathy but were really a kind of judgment. She'd ask him about his family in ways that felt like interrogation, trying to figure out whether he was good enough for our family. She once, at a family dinner, said something that I still remember word for word. "It's so interesting that you're a teacher, James. I mean, really, that must be so fulfilling. Not everyone can do that, you know? The pay is so terrible, but I guess the satisfaction is the point." Her voice was warm, friendly, but the subtext was unmistakable. "You're not one of us, and you never will be." I confronted her about it later, in private. "Why do you talk to him that way?" I asked. "Why do you always have to make him feel small?" "I don't know what you mean," she said, the picture of innocence. "I was just being nice. He's so sensitive, isn't he? Are you sure he's ready for this family? We can be a lot, you know." "He's ready for me," I said. "That's all that matters." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course it is. I'm happy for you, Sarah. Really, I am." The engagement. James proposed to me on the 2-year anniversary of the day we met, at the same gallery where we'd first talked, in front of the same painting that had started everything. He'd arranged it with the gallery owner, a close friend of mine, and when I walked in and saw the painting with a single white rose in front of it, I knew before he even got down on one knee. The ring was simple, beautiful, a sapphire set in platinum that he'd saved for months. I said yes. Of course I said yes. When I told my family, the reactions were mixed. My father was polite but reserved, the way he always was with anything that didn't fit his plan for our lives. My mother cried happy tears, but I could tell she was thinking about all the details, what people would say, what the wedding would look like, whether James's family would fit in with our crowd. And Eleanor? Eleanor's face, in that moment, was a mask of something I couldn't quite read. She smiled. She hugged me. She said all the right things. But later, when we were alone, she said something that I didn't fully understand until much later. "I hope you know what you're doing, Sarah. You're giving up a lot for him. You could have anyone." "Why him?" "Because I love him," I said. "Because he's the person I want to spend my life with." "I thought you'd be happy for me." "I am happy for you," she said. I want to make sure you're thinking clearly. People in our position have to be careful. You know that. There are people who'll take advantage of you. James is not one of those people," I said, and I walked away before I could say something I'd regret. I think, looking back, that was the moment Eleanor decided I was making a mistake. I think she convinced herself, somewhere in her mind, that James was after my family's money, that his love for me was transactional, that he was just another person trying to climb the social ladder. I don't know if she actually believed it, or if she just needed to believe it because the alternative, that I genuinely found something she'd never had, was too painful to accept. The slow campaign. The 9 months between my engagement and my wedding were the most difficult of my relationship with Eleanor. At first, her behavior was subtle. Small comments, casual observations, the kind of things that could be dismissed as sisterly concern if I wasn't paying attention. She'd ask about James's finances. She'd suggest, gently, that I get a prenup. She'd mention how many marriages ended in divorce when one partner came from a different background. But over time, it escalated. She started making more direct comments about James's family. I just think it's interesting that you're marrying into a family that's so different from ours. Do you really think you'll be happy? Do you really think he understands what it means to be part of this family? She started texting James directly with advice about how to be a good husband, advice that was clearly designed to undermine him, to make him feel inadequate, to remind him of the gulf between their worlds. James showed me some of the texts, and I was furious. "She's trying to make you feel small," I said. "Don't let her." "I won't," he said. "But Sarah, is she okay? She seems obsessed with this. With us. Why does she care so much?" I didn't have a good answer then. I didn't understand it myself. But I would, eventually. The wedding planning. Planning the wedding was where the real tension came out. My parents, of course, wanted a certain kind of wedding, elegant, expensive, the kind of event that would be written up in the society pages. I wanted something smaller, more intimate, something that reflected James and me rather than our families. We compromised, as couples do, on an event that was somewhere in the middle. Eleanor inserted herself into every part of the planning. She had opinions about the venue, the flowers, the guest list, the dress, the menu, the music. She offered to help with everything, but her help always came with strings attached. Her choices, her preferences, her desire to control every detail of what she saw as our family's public performance. I pushed back on several things. I didn't want the extravagant flowers she'd chosen. I didn't want the guest list to include people I barely knew. I didn't want the full sit-down dinner she'd insisted on. And every time I pushed back, she'd sigh and roll her eyes and make some comment about how I was settling for less than I deserved. "You used to want all of this," she said once, after I'd vetoed her suggestion of a live string quartet. "You used to dream about this wedding when we were kids. And now you're throwing it all away for, what? For someone who doesn't care about any of it." "I'm not throwing anything away," I said. "I'm building something new. Something that's mine. I don't have to want the same things I wanted when I was 12. "Clearly," she said, and there was something sharp in her voice that made me stop. "Eleanor," I said, "is there something you want to say to me? Something you've been holding back?" She looked at me for a long moment, and then she smiled. That particular smile that never quite reached her eyes. "No," she said. "Nothing. I just want you to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted." The discovery. I found out about the recordings 6 weeks before the wedding, in a way that I still think about with a kind of amazed disbelief. It was such a small thing, such an accidental discovery, and it changed everything. Eleanor and I were at my parents' house, going over final wedding details. She'd left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went to the bathroom, and I was using her iPad to look up something about the caterer. My own phone had died, and I needed to check a detail before confirming the final head count. I opened her iPad, and the screen was already active, showing an app one didn't recognize. It was a call recording application, and the most recent file was labeled, in clear, unmistakable text, Sarah_James_0412_10:30 p.m. Wave. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my brain trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Why would Eleanor have a recording of a call between me and James? I remembered that call. Actually, it was from about 2 weeks earlier, a late-night conversation where I'd been venting about the stress of wedding planning, about my frustrations with my parents' expectations, about my fears that James's family wouldn't feel welcome at the wedding. I scrolled up through the list of files. There were dozens of them, recordings of calls between me and James, me and my mother, me and my father, me and my closest friend. Some of them went back months. All of them were labeled with dates and names. And at the very top, in a folder marked Evidence, I found something that made my heart stop. It was a document a document Eleanor had been compiling for months. It listed every inconsistent thing I'd said in our conversations, every time I'd expressed frustration about the wedding, every time I'd complained about the cost, every time I'd mentioned James's family in a way that could be misinterpreted. She'd annotated it carefully, creating a narrative that painted me as someone who was only marrying James for his potential and who was secretly ashamed of his background. I sat down on the kitchen floor, the iPad still in my hands, and I started to cry. Not because I was afraid of what Eleanor would do, not yet, but because I realized in that moment that the sister I'd loved my whole life had been planning to destroy me. That for 9 months, she'd been gathering evidence, building a case, waiting for the perfect moment to use it against me. I heard Eleanor's footsteps coming back from the bathroom, and I quickly closed the iPad and set it back on the counter. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I smiled at her when she walked back into the kitchen, and I asked her something about the caterer, and I made it through the rest of the meeting without falling apart. But when I got home that night, I fell apart completely. What I did next. James was waiting for me when I got back to our apartment. I walked in, closed the door, and collapsed into his arms. I couldn't even speak at first. I just stood there, sobbing, while he held me and asked me what was wrong. It took me almost an hour to tell him everything. I told him about the recordings, about the files, about the folder marked evidence. I told him about the document compiling all my inconsistent statements. I told him what I suspected, that Eleanor was planning to use all of this at the wedding, to destroy us in front of everyone we loved. James listened without interrupting. When I was done, he was quiet for a long moment. "I'm going to ask you something," he said, finally. "And I need you to answer honestly, no matter what it is. Do you think she actually believes you're a gold digger? Or is she just making this up because she can't stand to see you happy?" I thought about it. "I don't know," I said. "I think she's convinced herself that I'm making a mistake. That you're not good enough for me. That I'm throwing away our family's legacy for someone who's not like us." I hated even saying the words, but they were true. "So she's projecting," James said. "She's jealous. She's miserable. And she's decided to make you miserable too." "Yeah," I said. "I think that's exactly what's happening." "What do you want to do about it?" he asked. I looked at him. His face was calm, steady. The same face I'd fallen in love with for years earlier. The face of someone who had been through hard things and come out the other side stronger. "I want to be ready," I said. "Whatever she's planning, whatever she's going to do at the wedding, I want to be ready for it. I want to have something of my own. I want to be able to show everyone the truth." He nodded slowly. "Then let's figure out how to do that." The 6 weeks of preparation. I want to walk you through exactly what I did over the next 6 weeks, because I think this is the part of the story that actually matters most, more than the confrontation itself, more than the satisfying reveal. The preparation is the real story. First, I contacted my father's personal attorney, a man named Harold Baines who'd known our family for decades. I met with him privately, without telling anyone in my family, and I laid out everything I discovered. He listened, his face impassive, and then he asked me a single question. "Are you sure you want to do this? Once it's out there, you can't take it back." "I'm sure," I said. "I need to know what my options are." Harold explained that under state law, Eleanor's recordings were illegal. Recording a conversation you're not even a participant in, without the consent of anyone on the call, is a wiretapping violation with both civil and criminal consequences. He told me that if I wanted to, I could press charges, that the evidence I'd found was more than enough to build a case. But he also told me something I hadn't fully considered. The recordings themselves, while illegally obtained, could still be used to damage my reputation if she played them publicly. The law would punish her afterward, but it wouldn't undo the damage. "The best thing you can do," Harold said, "is be ready. If she tries to use these recordings against you, you need to have something that shows the truth, your truth, not hers." So I started gathering everything I could. I documented James's financial history, his salary, his savings, his total lack of interest in my family's money. I documented the emails I'd sent to my parents expressing my love and commitment to him. I documented the conversations I'd had with my friends, my colleagues, the people who actually knew me. I built a file, a real, documented, undeniable file that showed exactly who I was and exactly what my relationship with James was actually like. And I started recording my own conversations with Eleanor. I knew it was legal. California law only requires one party's consent to record a call, and I knew I needed something that would show everyone the truth of what she'd been planning. I recorded 3 conversations over the following weeks, each one carefully chosen to elicit the exact admissions I needed. In the first conversation, I asked her, casually, whether she was worried about the wedding. She launched into a monologue about how she was concerned that James's family wouldn't fit in with ours, and how she thought I was making a mistake by marrying so far below my station. In the second conversation, I asked her whether she'd ever discussed my relationship with anyone else in the family. She admitted that she'd been talking to our parents behind the scenes, trying to convince them to intervene before it was too late. And in the third conversation, the one that mattered most, I asked her directly whether she'd ever considered exposing me at the wedding itself. She laughed, that sharp, cold laugh that I'd grown to hate. "Sarah," she said, you don't even know what's coming. You think you're going to have a beautiful, perfect wedding day? You think everyone's going to just smile and clap and pretend everything's fine? People need to know the truth. They need to see what you really are." "What am I, Eleanor?" I asked, my voice steady. "Someone who's been lying to everyone," she said. "Someone who's been pretending to love someone she's actually using. Someone who's going to get exactly what she deserves." I had everything I needed. The wedding day. The wedding itself was beautiful. Despite everything, despite the weight of what I knew was coming, I allowed myself to enjoy it. The ceremony was intimate and perfect, with James's students singing a song they'd written for us, and his mother crying happy tears in the front row, and my father walking me down the aisle with a look on his face that was, for once, genuinely proud. I had to put aside my anger, my fear, my knowledge of what Eleanor was planning, and just be present in the moment. And I did. The reception was held at a beautiful venue downtown, with string lights and flowers, and the kind of elegant details that had been the source of so many arguments with Eleanor over the past months. The food was incredible. The band was perfect. Everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time. I spent the first 45 minutes of the reception making my rounds, greeting guests, thanking people for coming, trying to enjoy the surreal experience of being the bride at my own wedding. James was by my side the entire time, his hand warm in mine, his presence a steadying force. We danced together, and I remember thinking, in that moment, that no matter what happened, I had found the person I was meant to be with. And then Eleanor stood up. The speech that wasn't. She was supposed to be giving a toast. That was the plan, the official script, the maid of honor, the older sister, the one who'd known me my whole life, offering warm words about the happy couple. She'd been working on the speech for weeks, she'd told me, and I knew exactly what she was actually working on. She stood at the head table, microphone in hand, and she looked out at the crowd with that particular smile I'd come to recognize, the smile that meant she thought she was about to win. "I want to say something," she began, her voice warm and friendly. "I know everyone's here to celebrate Sarah and James, and I want to celebrate them too. But I think there are some things that people need to know before they just clap and smile and pretend everything's perfect." I felt James's hand tighten on mine under the table. "You see," Eleanor continued, "for the past several months, I've been noticing some things. Things that didn't quite add up. Things that made me wonder if Sarah was really the person she's been pretending to be. And because I love her more than anything, I think she needs to hear the truth. I think all of you need to hear the truth." She pulled out her phone. "I've been recording some conversations," she said, "and I think it's important that everyone hear what Sarah really thinks about this marriage, about this family, about the person she's marrying." In her own words. She pressed play. The recording that came out of her phone was about 30 seconds long, and it was my voice, pulled from a call with James from about 2 months earlier. In the clip, I was saying something about how overwhelming the wedding planning was, how I'd never expected all of this, how I sometimes wished we could just run away and elope and forget about the whole thing. Out of context, it sounded like I was unhappy about the wedding, like I was having doubts about the marriage. In context, it was a conversation about stress, about the pressure of planning a massive event, about the specific exhaustion of navigating family expectations. The room went absolutely silent. I felt 150 pairs of eyes shift toward me, waiting to see what I would do. I stood up. What I did. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said, and I want you to understand that my voice did not shake, because I had been preparing for exactly this moment for 6 weeks. "I want to thank you for bringing this up tonight, because I have something I'd like to play too." I want every single person reading this to imagine, for a second, the specific look on Eleanor's face in that exact moment. The confident, prepared woman who just played her one piece of leverage, suddenly realizing, in real time, that the person she'd ambushed had walked in with leverage of her own. Her face went pale. Her hand, still holding the phone, started to shake. I walked calmly to the DJ booth, where I'd arranged for the equipment to be ready. I connected my own phone to the sound system, and I looked out at the crowd, my parents, my friends, James's family, everyone I loved. "Before I play this," I said, "I want to be clear about something for the record, in front of everyone here. What Eleanor just did, recording private phone calls between me and James without our knowledge, for 9 months, then playing them publicly, is not just a betrayal of trust. It's illegal. It's a wiretapping violation. I have documentation of that, prepared by an attorney, ready to be filed if it ever needs to be." I let that land for a moment. Eleanor had sat down, her face a mask of horror. My parents were staring at her with expressions I'd never seen before. James was standing beside me, his hand on my shoulder, steady and sure. "What I'm about to play," I continued, "is different. These are recordings of conversations I had directly with Eleanor, where I was a participant on the call. Under California law, that's completely legal because I only need my own consent to record a call I'm part of. I recorded 3 conversations with Eleanor over the past 6 weeks, after I discovered what she'd been doing to us for 9 months. I want everyone here to hear exactly what she said, in her own words, about her plans for tonight." I pressed play. The recordings. The first recording was from our first conversation, about 3 weeks before the wedding. In it, Eleanor's voice came through clear and cold, talking about how she was concerned about James, how she thought I was making a mistake, how she'd been talking to our parents behind the scenes to try to stop the wedding. The second recording was from about 2 weeks before the wedding. In it, Eleanor admitted, in her own words, that she was jealous, that she'd been unhappy in her own life, that she'd never found anyone who made her feel the way James made me feel, that she couldn't stand seeing me so happy when she was so miserable. And the third recording, the one I'd been saving for last, was the one where she'd laughed and told me that people need to know the truth, that they need to see what you really are, that she'd been working on something special for the wedding. When the third recording ended, there was a moment of absolute, deafening silence. And then I looked directly at Eleanor and said something that changed everything. "But there's one more thing," I said. "Something I haven't played yet. Something I think everyone here deserves to know about. The embezzlement." I pulled up another file. Not a recording, but a document. A financial document that I'd found, by accident, while I was going through our family's shared cloud storage, looking for wedding photos. I'd been looking for photos of our parents' wedding, something to show at the reception, and I'd stumbled on a folder I wasn't supposed to see. The folder contained records. Financial records. Records that showed Eleanor had been embezzling from my parents' business for nearly 2 years. I didn't want to believe it at first. I'd stared at the spreadsheets for hours, trying to find some innocent explanation. But the evidence was undeniable. Eleanor had been siphoning money from our parents' accounts, covering her tracks with fake invoices and fabricated expenses. She'd taken tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more. She'd been stealing from our own family. I showed the documents to Harold Baines, our family attorney, and he confirmed what I already suspected. If I brought this to our parents, Eleanor could be facing criminal charges. I'd been sitting on that knowledge for weeks, trying to decide what to do with it. I didn't want to destroy my sister's life. I didn't want to be the one who sent her to prison. But I also knew, deep down, that I couldn't protect her from the truth, especially not when she was trying to destroy me. Before I play this next recording, I said, looking directly at Eleanor, I want to ask you something. I want to give you one chance to tell the truth, right here, in front of everyone. Is there anything you want to say? Anything you want to confess before I do it for you? Eleanor stared at me, her face ashen. What are you talking about? She whispered. I'm talking about the money, I said. I'm talking about the accounts. I'm talking about the 2 years of embezzlement from Mom and Dad's business. I didn't want to do this, Eleanor. I didn't want to expose you. But you gave me no choice. The room erupted. My father stood up, his face a mask of shock. My mother covered her mouth with her hands. Guests started murmuring, whispering, trying to process what they'd just heard. That's not true, Eleanor said, but her voice was shaking. That's not true. You're lying. I'm not lying, I said. I have the documents. I have the spreadsheets. I have everything. And if you don't come clean right now, I'm going to play the recording of you admitting to it. It was a bluff. I didn't have a recording of her admitting to embezzlement. But I didn't need one. Her face told me everything I needed to know. Eleanor's confession. Eleanor broke. In front of 150 guests at her sister's wedding reception, she broke. She started crying. Not the elegant, controlled tears she'd perfected over the years, but the ugly, helpless sobs of someone who has been caught and knows there's no escape. She tried to speak, but she couldn't get the words out. She just sat there, her shoulders shaking, while the entire room watched. My father walked over to her. His face was pale, his mouth set in a hard line. Is it true? He asked. Did you take money from the business? Eleanor nodded, still sobbing. I was going to pay it back, she said. I was going to pay it all back. I needed it. I needed the money. I was in debt. I made bad investments. I didn't know what else to do. You didn't know what else to do, my father repeated, his voice flat. So you stole from your own family. For 2 years. While we trusted you with everything. I'm sorry, Eleanor sobbed. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I looked at her, my sister, the golden child, the one who'd always been better than me, smarter than me, more successful than me. She was broken. She was exposed. And despite everything she'd done, I felt something close to pity. But I also felt something else. Relief. Relief that the truth was finally out. Relief that I didn't have to carry the weight of her secrets anymore. Relief that I could finally move on. The aftermath. The rest of the reception was a blur. Eleanor left early, driven home by one of my aunts. My parents were in shock, trying to process what they'd just learned. Guests whispered among themselves, the atmosphere permanently altered by what had happened. But I didn't let it ruin my wedding. James took my hand, and we danced and we laughed, and we celebrated the beginning of our life together. I refused to let Eleanor's betrayal steal that from me. In the weeks that followed, a lot happened. My parents confronted Eleanor about the embezzlement, and she confessed to everything. She'd been in debt for years, trying to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown up with on a salary that couldn't quite support it. She'd made bad investments, taken out loans she couldn't repay, and eventually, she'd started taking money from the business to cover her losses. She'd been doing it for so long that she'd convinced herself she'd find a way to pay it back eventually. But she never did. And now, she was facing the consequences. My parents chose not to press criminal charges. They didn't want the scandal, didn't want to see their daughter go to prison. But they did cut her off financially. They stopped funding her lifestyle, stopped bailing her out, stopped pretending everything was fine. Eleanor had to sell her apartment, her car, most of her possessions. She moved into a small studio apartment in a less desirable part of the city. She got a job at a smaller firm, making significantly less money. She had to rebuild her life from scratch. It was, in some ways, a kindness. My parents could have destroyed her legally. Instead, they gave her a chance to start over, but without the safety net she'd always relied on. The conversation we never had. I want to tell you that Eleanor and I reconciled. I want to tell you that we had a heart-to-heart conversation, that she apologized sincerely, that we found a way back to each other. But that's not what happened. Eleanor and I have spoken a few times since the wedding. The conversations have been stiff, awkward, full of things we both want to say, but can't quite bring ourselves to articulate. She's apologized, in her way. She said she's sorry for what she did, sorry for the recordings, sorry for the embezzlement, sorry for everything. But I don't know if I can ever fully trust her again. I don't know if the sister I loved, the sister I grew up with, is still in there somewhere. And I'm not sure I'm ready to find out. I told myself, in the weeks after the wedding, that I needed to forgive her, that holding on to the anger would only hurt me, that letting go was the only way to move forward.
And I tried.
I really tried. But forgiveness is complicated. It's not a switch you can flip. It's a process, a long, slow process of understanding and acceptance and letting go. And I'm not there yet. I don't know if I ever will be. Where things are now. It's been 6 months since the wedding. James and I are happy, genuinely, deeply, profoundly happy. We're in our apartment, a small but beautiful space that we've made our own. I'm still working at the gallery, and I've started a new project, a program that brings art education to under-resourced schools, inspired by James's work with his students. He's still teaching, still showing up every day for his kids, still the same incredible person I fell in love with. My relationship with my parents has changed. We're closer now, in some ways, than we've ever been. They've seen me handle something impossible with grace and strength, and I think they respect me for it. My mother, especially, has been supportive. She's told me, more than once, that I was right to trust James, that he's the best thing that ever happened to me. And Eleanor? Eleanor is Eleanor. She's still my sister. I still love her, in the complicated, ambivalent way that you love someone who's hurt you deeply. But I don't trust her. And I don't know if I ever will. I think about her sometimes. I think about the little girl I grew up with, the one who taught me how to ride a bike, who held my hand when I was scared, who promised we'd always be there for each other. I wonder where that girl went. I wonder what happened to her. And I wonder if she's still in there somewhere, buried under all the jealousy and resentment and pain. The questions I keep coming back to. I want to leave you with a question I keep coming back to myself, because I genuinely want to know where you land on it. Do you think I made the right call, waiting and preparing instead of confronting Eleanor the very night I discovered the recordings? Or do you think 9 months of secret recordings and 2 years of embezzlement deserved an immediate, furious response, rather than 6 weeks of careful, quiet strategy? I read every single comment, and I am consistently surprised by how differently people answer this. And one more thing I'll ask you before I go, because I think it's the question that actually sits underneath this entire story. Do you think Eleanor's 9 months of recording came from a twisted kind of love? Love for me? Love for our family? A genuine but misguided belief that she was protecting us from something? Or do you think calling it love, even a broken version of it, gives her too much credit for something that was, underneath everything, really about control and jealousy? I go back and forth on this myself. Even now, 6 months later, and I want to know where you land. I also think about the embezzlement, about how Eleanor was stealing from our own parents while accusing me of being a gold digger. The irony is not lost on me. She was projecting, pure and simple. Everything she accused me of, she was doing herself. She was the one who was after money. She was the one who was being dishonest. She was the one who was betraying the family. And I think that's the thing I keep coming back to. The thing I can't quite get over. Eleanor spent 9 months gathering evidence against me, building a case, planning to destroy me, all while she was stealing from our own parents. All while she was the one who had actually betrayed the family. All while she was the one who was living a lie. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand why she did it. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully forgive her. But I do know, with absolute certainty, that I made the right choice. I chose to be prepared. I chose to fight for my truth. And I chose to protect the person I love, even when it meant exposing the person I grew up with. That's my story. 9 months of secret recordings. 6 weeks of quiet preparation. And one wedding reception where a sister who thought she held all the leverage in the room found out, in front of 150 guests, that she'd badly, fundamentally underestimated the person she was trying to destroy. If you want more stories like this, subscribe right now. I post twice a day, every single day, and the next one is going to leave you just as stunned as this one did. See you there.